Okay, and you've been involved in journalism for a long time. How important are awards and events like this?
Well, awards and events are one thing, but awards and events like this are something completely different, really, because I've been to, awards and event ceremonies, which are for mainly people established in the industry to recognise the work that they're doing, and that's all well and good. But this is something slightly different. This is for youngsters who might be thinking of a career in journalism or journalism as a study subject later on in life. And what we're really trying to do, of course, is to engage them with the idea of journalism, whether it be news journalism or sports journalism, political journalism, environmental journalism. Engage them with the idea of that as potentially a future career. So from that perspective, I think these are very, very important. Yes, we can call it an award, if you like, an event, if you like, but what it really is a programme to try and engage young people in journalism and produce, hopefully, the next generation of journalists.
And you touched on it there. Naturally, these young children who are applying, the things they speak about are important issues, surprisingly, like climate change and like political issues. Does that speak to how important those issues are, that without being prompted, and that's what they naturally want to write about?
Yes, absolutely. A very good point, because I think this is now the 15th, maybe 16th year that we've run the Future Journalism event. And when we started it, most youngsters, and when we say youngsters, we're talking of ages from 7 to 16, most of them were writing either about sport or about their favourite celebrities. That was mainly what they were writing about. But these days, we're seeing much more prominence given to writing about environmental issues, climate change, the challenges to humanity, the challenges to the planet. And they're much more engaged now with that sort of topic. And I think that kind of reflects the movements in society, I remember looking back at football, the 2006 World Cup, it was basically a riot of celebrity reporting by the press and the media. That's what it was all about. And that's how the world probably was 15, 16 years ago. But I think we've now become, and rightly so, we've become much more focused on deeper issues like, the environment and climate change. And I think that, the youngsters are reflecting that change.
Touching on that, how much do you think the industry's changed since you've been involved in it, especially with the influx of social media and stuff in the last 10, 15 years?
Well, in the last 10 or 15 years, it's changed an awful lot. I've been in the industry nearly 40 years, and I would say the pace of change in the last 5 years has been more rapid than it was in the previous 25 years, for two reasons, really. One, because the subjects of what we're concerned about are changing, as we've said previously, with climate and environment. And secondly, of course, the way that we deliver news now and the way that we consume news has changed. And it's not been a steady graph, it's not been a steady climb of change. It's been a reasonably, not flat graph, but a reasonably upward graph until about 10 years ago, when things changed completely. Not just the way that people now operate as journalists, but the way people are employed as journalists and the way that companies employ people in the media. And of course what you need to know in terms of technology, what you need to learn, the different ways of going about the job. Because when I started off in journalism, there was effectively 3 ways of being a journalist. You could either be a print journalist, work for television or magazine. You could be a radio journalist, or you could be a TV journalist. And that was it, really. But now, people used to focus on one of those and be one of those. You would either be print, you would be radio, or you would be TV. You might change those roles during your career, but at any one given time, you would be one of those things. And the modern journalist needs to be many things all at the same time. So, you might be a print journalist, but you will be making content for digital platforms, for example. You might be a TV journalist, but you will be writing content for digital platforms. And of course, the other thing that we haven't thrown into that mix is public relations, which has grown exponentially over the last 20 or 30 years, particularly in the field of sport. The amount of opportunities now that exist in the world of sport for people to combine the skills of journalism and public relations, compared to when I started off, there were no jobs in public relations in sport, or if there were very few and far between. They're almost impossible to get. But now people can leave university with a good degree and they can go and build themselves a career in public relations in sport and in journalism, and maybe do both at the same time as a freelance.
If you think back to when you was the same age, some of the young children here today, and you were tasked with producing a video or a written project on something that you cared passionately about, is there a certain topic that comes to mind?
Let me cast my mind back to the 1980s. I think it would have been almost impossible to produce, actually I'm lying if you say child, 1970s. I think it would have been impossible then to produce a video, because we just didn't have the technology, unless your parents were wealthy enough to own, a 9mm home camera with the old style sort of spools of film that you'd have to mess around with loading and unloading and getting developed. So that was not in the equation. So it would have been, and the web didn't exist, online didn't exist. So it was mainly writing. And in my day, the things that youngsters were interested in were pop music, I suppose, and sport. But of course, the amount of sports coverage was nowhere near what it is today. If you were interested in sport, there was no live football on television back in the 1970s, except for the FA Cup final, once a year, or maybe the odd England international. Otherwise, it was watching recorded highlights. There was no 24/7 coverage on the internet. You had to wait until your parents had finished with the daily or evening newspaper and then grab a quick read of it. And so that was how we engaged. And that's important, because today's generation have so many different ways in which they can engage with their favourite subjects, literally round the clock. Well, I hope not round the clock, because of course they need to go to bed in the evening and get some sleep. But you understand what I'm saying, and not just your immediate surroundings. So it's a global business now. So in my day, if you were interested in American football, you've got virtually no way of accessing any information on American football. These days, of course, it's around you all the time. So I think in our day, your interests were on a much narrower platform, because you could only become interested in what information you could get access to. Whereas today, a 10-year-old today can have a multitude of different interests, not just from, in this city or in this country, but around the world. If you want to go and follow an American football team, then you can go and follow an American football team, and you have instant access to all of that information 24/7. So it's a very, very different world now, I think.